chocolate, and then the next day they continue eating chocolate, right? So this is called the time inconsistency problem. And of course, there's nothing wrong with changing your plans if you have new information, but if you do not stick to your plans, then of course the whole intertemporal model works differently. And so we have assumed that people have time-consistent preferences or time-consistent behavior, but if they don't, then we have to start from scratch. Secondly, why do the data suggest that the current account is anti-cyclical, that is decreasing in good times and increasing in bad times? Well, let me give you an answer based on the model. Suppose that you have a positive technology shock in the current period. So capital and labor become more productive. Capital will be more productive in the future as well. Now what that means is, in the current period, you're doing a large investment, or in the current period, your output goes up, but you're doing large investments because capital will be more productive. You also do not reduce consumption by much because you know that you will have a large output in the future. As a result, output goes up and the current account goes down because S goes down and I goes up, and bingo, we get a negative correlation between consumption and between the current account and output. So we can use this model to rationalize the negative correlation between output and the current account that we observe in the data. And now here are the questions that Michael Binder addressed yesterday at the conference. How does international financial integration affect growth and welfare? Right? That's an empirical question. The model suggests that international financial integration does have a positive effect because you can increase, you can smooth consumption and you can increase the capital stock, and that's welfare enhancing. Now what Michael Binder showed in his presentation yesterday, it depends on some conditions like the quality of institutions, for example. And the fourth bullet point is, do all individuals in an economy appreciate financial integration? And that's also Michael Binder's and Dr. Haas' paper that was presented yesterday. What are the distributional consequences of financial integration? I mean, they look at FDI. And again, it's an interesting thing. They find that it's conditional on certain other things. This is still a super interesting strand of research, right? We know a lot about the distributional effects of trade. We know very little about the distributional effects of financial integration. So might be a potential master thesis further down the road. Okay. Here's some references. Here's some want to know more stuff. And that's it. Don't run away. I will not run away either. Let's take a, take a deep breath. And let me go into the next presentation. So here's an overview. I'll motivate the whole thing. Then I will briefly explain the so-called overlapping generations model. I've been told that you have seen it before, so it's good. Then some of this is just reviewing material. Then I'll look at demographic change and the current account. And this is something that has become increasingly a matter of interest for economic analysis. Then I give you some further applications of OLG models, and then this is very policy oriented. This is the IMF's external balance assessment approach. So the IMF is the International Monetary Fund. It's kind of the policy institution when it comes to international financial markets. Exchange rates, current account balances, ... Does anybody remember what the IMF was set up for? So why do we have the International Monetary Fund? nice to have, but I mean, at some point someone must have decided that we want to have it. Now, until 1973, there was a thing called the Bretton Woods arrangement. The Bretton Woods arrangement was a system of fixed exchange rates in the Western Hemisphere, let me call it this way. So it was Europe, United States, Canada, Latin America, several Asian countries. They had fixed exchange rates. A fixed exchange rate regime is something that's interesting, right? So when my parents, let me give you the example. When my parents got up in the morning in the 1960s, when they were quite young, and said, how many Deutschmarks do we have to pay for one US dollar? At that time, Germany had its own currency. How many Deutschmarks do we have for one US dollar? The answer was day after day after day after day, the same. 4 Deutschmarks for $1. Later, it was adjusted, but then again, it was a super boring question because the answer was obvious. Same thing for the Italians, same thing for the French, same thing for the Canadians. Exchange rates were fixed, and they were fixed for a long time. And the institution that was set up to manage that system of fixed exchange rate regimes was the International Monetary Fund. And since at that time the United States were very much in favor of globalization, it's located in Washington, D.C. on Pennsylvania Avenue. Now, the Bretton Woods system broke down in the early 70s. Since then, some countries have fixed exchange rates, others have flexible exchange rates. That's what I talked about yesterday. And the IMF had to answer the question, what are you guys good for? Right? It's like, suppose you have a janitor or a warden, taking care of a house, and all of a sudden the house is not there anymore. So what does that person do? Now the IMF redefined its role and became something like a development assistance institution, helping countries in financial troubles. And the IMF became also some kind of policy watchdog at a supranational level. And as such, it's very important, right? So there's a lot of very smart people, many of them not from the United States, right, in the IMF. And one thing they do is that they make normative statements about countries' current account balances. Normative in the sense of, so we observe that Germany is running a current account surplus of 8% of GDP. Is this okay? I'll not give you the answer, but so we see that, another country is running a current account deficit of 6% of GDP. Is that okay? And so that's an answer that is not very easy the question that's not very easy to answer. And what I'll do is I'll show you how the IMF does that, right? And they publish this in a so-called external sector reports, which they publish every year, and they say, look, we observe this and that, and we think this is what we would expect, and it's good, and this is what we would not expect. So this is, and the nice thing is, what the IMF does in the EBA approach is grounded in the very theory that we're talking about here. Okay, so you'll see that all the theory about consumption smoothing and ... it's going to pay off. Alrighty, so taking stock. Motivation of the infinite horizon model is dynastic preferences, dynastic wealth, and dynastic liabilities. The strength of the infinite horizon representative consumer model is that you do not impose any arbitrary constraint on agent's time horizon. That's good. And you can analyze the shocks with different degrees of persistence. So temporary versus permanent. That's the beauty, the model that we used. What are the shortcomings? Well, first and foremost, the model makes heroic assumptions on the extent of intergenerational altruism and the possible extent of intergenerational transfers, positive and negative. So I introduced this on Wednesday. I mean, we don't believe that people think they live forever. I will not live forever. You will not live forever. So how the heck can we assume that in this model, the representative consumer has an infinite time horizon? And the answer was, we assume that the RC cares about his offspring, and the offspring cares about his offspring, and the offspring's offspring cares about the offspring's offspring's offspring. So you have that dynasty. Question: how much do you care today about your grandchildren? Very little, yeah. I mean, you don't know these people. I mean, maybe you don't even know whether you will have grandchildren. So what about your blah, blah, blah. That's the first problem. The second thing is, that's actually a weird thing, and few people notice. So what would, in the representative consumer model, what would be the optimal bequest of Elon Musk's father to his son? So I have no clue about